The unforgiving wind of the Alaskan winter howled like a banshee, biting through the thin cotton shift that was all Sarah wore. She lay in a heap in the snow, the sharp crystals a cruel embrace against her bare skin. Her breaths came in ragged, painful gasps, each one a plume of white smoke in the frigid air. The grand house she had once called home stood silent and indifferent behind her, its windows' dark eyes watching her slow demise. Her in-laws, the austere and unyielding Miller family, had cast her out. Accused of being a barren curse upon their lineage, they had stripped her of her wedding ring, her dignity, and finally, her clothes. "The wilderness takes what is weak," old Mr. Miller had sneered, his words colder than the gale. Now the wilderness was coming for her. A numbing cold spread from her extremities, creeping inward, promising a gentle, eternal sleep. Just as the world began to fade into a soft white blur, a shadow fell over her. Not the shadow of a tree, but a man, immense and cloaked in furs. He knelt, his movements surprisingly gentle for his size. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, held a flicker of something she hadn't seen in months: compassion. "You're not long for this world, girl," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But today is not your day to die." Without waiting for a response she couldn't give, he scooped her up. Her body, stiff and unresponsive, felt like a child's toy in his powerful arms. He smelled of pine, wood smoke, and the clean scent of the cold earth. As he carried her through the snow, the biting wind was now a distant memory, replaced by the surprising warmth of his body. He was a force of nature, a part of the landscape, yet he held her with a careful tenderness. The cabin was a simple affair, a small fortress against the elements. Inside, a fire roared in the stone hearth, casting a golden dancing light that banished the deep shadows. He placed her on a pile of furs by the fire, then wrapped her in a thick wool blanket. The feeling of warmth returning to her body was a profound shock, a cascade of sharp, stinging pain that quickly gave way to a blessed, overwhelming comfort. He handed her a cup of hot, dark liquid. "Drink this. It'll get the heat back into your bones." It was a bitter, earthy tea, but it was life. As she sipped, her mind began to clear. She saw him properly for the first time. He was a mountain of a man, with a thick, dark beard, peppered with silver, and a face etched with the lines of a hard life. He moved with a quiet, efficient grace, tending to the fire and mending a leather strap. He didn't ask questions. He simply existed, a silent sentinel in the wilderness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse and raw. He glanced at her, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "It's what a man does." That night she slept by the fire, the first peaceful sleep she'd had in years. The wind outside still raged, but she was safe. She was alive. But as she drifted off, a new kind of fear settled in her heart. Who was this man? And what would happen to her now, miles from any civilization, with only a stranger for company? Want to see what happens next in Sarah's journey? Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on the next part of this epic story. The days bled into each other, each one a quiet revelation. The man's name was Elias. He was a trapper and a guide, a man who had chosen a life of solitude. His cabin was a testament to his self-reliance, with pelts drying on frames outside and a pantry stocked with dried meat, smoked fish, and wild berries. Sarah's initial fear of him began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet respect. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He taught her how to set snares, how to identify edible plants, and how to track game in the snow. He showed her the beauty of the vast, white landscape, the way the sun glinted off the icicles, the silent dance of the northern lights, the subtle tracks of a lone wolf. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the silence between them was not awkward, but comfortable. Sarah, her voice still a little tentative, finally spoke of her past. She told him about her marriage, a loveless union arranged for wealth and status, and the cruel abandonment by her in-laws. Elias listened, his face impassive, but his eyes held a depth of understanding that surprised her. "They're a different breed, those city folk," he said, the crackle of the fire a counterpoint to his words. "They measure a person by what they own, or what they can provide. Out here, a person is measured by their grit, their heart." Sarah's eyes welled with tears, the first she had shed since she was thrown into the snow. Not of sorrow, but of profound relief. He understood. He saw her, not as a barren woman, but as a person. He saw the pain in her eyes and gently changed the subject. "Tomorrow, we'll check the traps. The lynx are moving in the valley." Their days were a rhythm of survival and connection. They worked together, shared meals, and watched the changing light of the Alaskan sky. Sarah discovered a resilience within herself she never knew existed. The woman who had been a prisoner in a gilded cage was now learning to be a survivor in the wild. She was not the same person who had been thrown out of the Miller house. The cold had stripped her of her old life, and in its place a new one was beginning to grow, stronger and more authentic. As the weeks turned into months, a subtle shift occurred in their relationship. The quiet respect between them deepened into a different kind of connection, a silent current of attraction. It was in the way his hand lingered when he passed her a tool, or the way she found herself watching him, mesmerized by the quiet strength in his movements. It was an unspoken promise of a future they dared not name. One night, the wind howled louder than ever, rattling the cabin's small window panes. Elias sat whittling a piece of wood, the firelight illuminating the planes of his face. "The Miller family," he said, his voice low. "They sent men out to look for you." Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. "Why?" "They're afraid. A body found out in the snow could lead to questions. They'd rather bury you out here, where no one would ever find you." A chilling fear ran through her. Her old life, the one she had thought was gone, was coming back to haunt her. But this time she wasn't alone. She looked at Elias, at the steady determination in his eyes. He wasn't just a man in the woods, he was her protector. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice a whisper. He stopped whittling, his gaze meeting hers. "We wait. We've got a blizzard coming in. No one will be able to get through, but once it passes." He left the thought unfinished, but the meaning was clear. The storm was coming, both outside and in their lives, and they would face it together. The blizzard hit with a vengeance. The world outside turned into a white chaos, a maelstrom of snow and wind. Elias secured the cabin, his movements urgent and precise. Sarah helped him, her newfound skills proving invaluable. She packed snow against the walls for insulation and stacked firewood inside. They were a team, a quiet, efficient unit working to survive. As the storm raged, they were trapped in the cabin. The space felt smaller, more intimate. The unspoken tension between them, that quiet current of attraction, was now a tangible force in the small, warm room. One evening, as they shared a meal of stew, a log shifted in the fire, sending a cascade of sparks into the air. Elias looked at her, the firelight dancing in his eyes. The usual impassive mask was gone, replaced by a raw, open vulnerability. "Sarah," he said, his voice a low, rough murmur, "I know who you were, but I've seen who you are. The woman who faced the storm, who is learning to thrive out here, that's the woman I see." He reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm, comforting, and yet it sent a jolt of something new through her. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was a profound, emotional connection. It was a sense of belonging, a feeling she had never experienced, not in her fancy dress, not in her grand house. "And who do you see, Elias?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "A man who has been alone for too long, a man who found a reason to live beyond survival, he said, his gaze unwavering. In that small, quiet cabin surrounded by the raging storm, they finally broke through the walls they had built around their hearts. They spoke of their fears, their hopes, and the unspoken feelings that had been growing between them. They were two broken souls, finding solace and strength in each other's company. The next morning, the blizzard finally broke. The world outside was a pristine, silent white, a blank slate. Elias stood at the window, his expression grim. "They'll be coming now," he said. The sound of footsteps on the crunching snow outside shattered the silence. It wasn't the sound of one person, but of many. Elias grabbed his rifle, a look of steely resolve on his face. "Stay back, Sarah," he commanded, moving toward the door. The door burst open, and Mr. Miller stood there, flanked by two armed men. His eyes, cold and calculating, fell on Sarah and then on the thick furs she was wearing. "So you didn't die after all, you wretched girl," he sneered, his gaze sweeping over the cabin. "It seems you found a new host, a simple mountain man. We'll dispose of him and then we'll finish what we started." Elias stepped forward, his rifle at the ready. "She's not going anywhere." The confrontation was swift and brutal. It wasn't a fight of brute strength, but of strategy and the knowledge of the land. Elias, with his deep understanding of the wilderness, outmaneuvered the city men. He was a force of nature, protecting what was his. After the dust settled, Mr. Miller and his men were disarmed, and their sled was disabled. Elias stood over the defeated Mr. Miller, his rifle pointed at his chest. "Get out of here, and if you ever come back, know that the wilderness is far less forgiving than I am." As they disappeared over the horizon, a cold, hard look on their faces, Elias turned back to Sarah. The cabin, their sanctuary, had been invaded. But their bond, forged in the storm, was now stronger than ever. He walked over to her, his gaze gentle. "It's not safe here anymore," he said. "We have to leave." "Where will we go?" she asked. He looked at her, a silent promise in his eyes. "Wherever the north wind takes us, as long as we're together." The sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the vast, untouched landscape. Sarah looked at Elias, at the man who had lifted her from the snow and given her a new life. He was not a prince or a hero from a storybook. He was just a man. And he was enough. He was her home. They would face the unknown together, two souls forged in the harsh beauty of the Alaskan wilderness, ready to build a new life, a new home, far away from the old one, and forever intertwined.